So our community has been reviewing the basics of nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And in it, he talks about how instead of playing a game called Making Life Wonderful, a lot of the time we play a game called Who's Right? And sadly, it's a game where everyone loses. So I've been thinking a lot about the social conditioning I've received around what's right and what's wrong, and the price I've paid personally for hanging on to ideas about fixed notions of what's right and what's wrong and making judgments about myself and the world through that framework. So these are just some ongoing reflections about right and wrong. So if you've ever visited Singapore, you will have seen there's a famous tourist t-shirt that says, "Singapore is a fine city." And underneath are all the logos of all the things you cannot do and will get fined for. So like, no smoking, fine $1,000. No eating or drinking, fine $500. No littering, fine $1,000. My favorite is no durian. You can't bring durians on the public transport because it smells. So there's a real, symbol of the durian with a no on it. So, I grew up in this world where right and wrong is defined very clearly, and there are consequences, and they are enforced. I had a friend who flicked the little cigarette butt and had to pay $500 for that. Yep. And I would say once you have laws set up that way, it can permeate many aspects of life. And our education system was the same. There was the right kind of school to go to that will determine your future. So my mother made sure we went to the right kind of school, and there were the right kind of subjects to study. But I think that's where I started to go wrong. Because if you are one of the, if you're a student doing well academically, then everyone expects you to do the hard sciences, become a doctor or an engineer, someone with a useful skill. I did not do that. I studied the humanities, much to everyone's great disappointment. And when I was 17, I still remember the first time I did not score straight A's on a major exam. I can even remember my grades from then. But, so a major exam happens, I get a B, B, C, D, and I get called in by the head of the humanities program, who says, "What kind of grades are these? You came in with straight A's." And I proceed to tell him, "Look, I plan to major in theater studies at the National University of Singapore. The minimum requirement is 3 C's. These grades are good enough. I am in the English drama club, I am in the Chinese drama club, I have many shows, I don't have time to study, but this is what I want to do with my life." And after that, it felt a bit like all hell broke loose internally. It was probably one of the most difficult conversations of my life, where I just remember being in there for about 1 hour with someone much older and much larger, who proceeded to tell me that my choices in life were wrong, that I was expected to get a scholarship and get a place at Oxford or Cambridge. And I said, "I don't want to earn a scholarship." And he says, "The whole school has to sit for the test, period, because it's that kind of school." So I came out of this conversation really shocked and sad. And I just so wish I had met Marshall Rosenberg back then, because he goes on to say, when you're in an environment like that, right, when there's a clear definition of right and wrong, he says, never give them the power to make you submit or rebel. And he says, one of the things we want to teach children very early, no matter what structure you're in, is to never lose track that you are free to choose what you do. Don't allow institutions to determine what you do. So, to even think in those ways was just not available to me back then. It was just like, I felt like I was being told, submit or you're going to get kicked out or disapproved of. And of course, there was no familial support for my great dreams. It was like, are you insane for wanting to do this? So I submitted, and I did get a scholarship, and I earned a place at Cambridge. So I was supposed to go do all these things according to what other people thought. The little twist was that the school that year organized a field trip to the US for the first time to scope out colleges in the US. And what I discovered on that trip, and my parents were very kind, they allowed me to go on this, they funded it, I think also to prevent me from going to study theater studies in Singapore. But what I learned was that you could study in the US, you could major in English at a liberal arts college and smuggle your theater education in. So that was my little compromise, and that's how I wound up coming here to study. And I thought that I was doing something, for myself, or finding some way to work out this submit or rebel kind of dynamic. But I do think ultimately the problem with this is you're still playing this game of who's right, according to someone else's standards. So I had allowed someone else to tell me my dreams were wrong, and I spent about 10 years trying to do what was right and pursue a kind of social success that someone else had defined, and it was miserable, totally miserable. I was just not living in line with my own values. So when I think about this too, I was thinking about, where is that space? All of us must have experienced it at some point in life, right, where the world did not function according to right and wrong like this. And for me, looking back, I can see why I found the arts to be a refuge, because that was the one space where things were not so clearly defined in those rigid terms. I just always remember going into acting class and the teacher saying, well, there's only one rule in my classroom. You can do anything you want as long as it doesn't harm yourself or others. And it was like, wow, really? And we could. It was true. It's a creative process. And we found out there's just so many ways to make a show, right? There's not one way that's right or wrong. You can start with a script. You can improvise. You can start by interviewing real life people and use that as the material. Even if you are given a character to work with, you have a psychological approach, a physical approach. So I think for the first time I understood, it just really depends. I think there's a first little taste of, how do you tell if a show is good? Well, depends. Depends who the director is and what they want to accomplish. Depends on the cast. Depends on the society that you're staging the play in. Depends on funding. Depends on censorship. Depends. I think so. That was the first time I realized, there's no one person judging right and wrong. Instead, a fuller picture of reality is dependent on so many moving parts. So I just thought it was ironic that even though the theater is all about creating a fictional universe, it was the first place that was much more in alignment, I think, with reality. So just coming from this kind of background, I will say I'd never imagined that I would become a religious person. Because back then, not having any contact with organized religion, just as an outsider, it seemed to me that organized religion was all about right and wrong. Right? There are some things you can do and you cannot, and there are consequences. So what really drew me to Buddhism eventually was to see that this was a system where ethical conduct is a practice that we engage in voluntarily. That came to me as a real surprise. Like, you learn about the precepts and then you choose to take them. You can take 1 or 5. It's like, all right. And to learn that your motivation can be at many different levels. And when I started taking out the precepts, it was to improve my concentration. I was like, I like meditating. The teachings say this is the foundation. If you do ethical conduct, your concentration should increase. I'm like, okay, let's try that. No more than that. So over time, I learned, you can keep ethical conduct not to harm. You can keep ethical conduct as a practice to love, to be compassionate, to cultivate bodhicitta. And there's, again, no right or wrong, right? Depends where you are in your practice. I love that when we learn about the 10 non-virtues, we are told immediately that there's no inherently existent right or wrong. Right? We label these non-virtues independent upon whether they bring happy or suffering results. And of course, that is seen by an omniscient mind. So, you have to have some faith that the person who is teaching this does know that, right? Because that's how I understand the definition of non-virtues and virtues anyway, that an omniscient mind can see through multiple lifetimes what will bring happiness and suffering in the long run. But anyway, the point that hit home for me was, dependent arising. That's how these things are all being defined. I appreciate that we are told there are many different scopes of practitioners, and the path that we take depends on our motivation. Or what do we hope to accomplish? What are our interests and dispositions? When I first met the Dharma, I remember hearing a story about someone asking Milarepa why he didn't practice like his teacher Marpa. Because as we know, Marpa was a layperson, he was married, he lived very much embedded in a society and was a farmer, right? And was a great practitioner and translator. While his disciple Milarepa does the complete opposite, right? Takes off to the caves and is subsisting on nettles. So someone asked Milarepa, why don't you just practice like your teacher did? And I think his response was, my mind's not strong enough. He said, I can't live like my teacher did. I need to be like secluded from the household life. And he knew his own mind. So I just thought that was interesting to see, like, from this get-go, there's no one cookie cutter way. And it helps a lot, I think, to have a teacher who knows this path, who knows our disposition, and they can advise us. But again, it's not in the context of right, wrong. There's only one way to do it. And thinking outside of this box of right and wrong also helps me a lot with cultivating compassion. Because if I believe that everybody just wants to be happy and not suffer, right, then, wow, the idea that there are people, well, including myself, right, when you're confused, you think that harming other people is going to make you happy? How sad is that? How confused that is, right? So that just takes the whole right and wrong dynamic out of the picture. Or for me, thinking being number one will bring me happiness. Really? Come on, not even in this life. Yeah, but I guess I had to hit my head on the wall and figure that one out. And so then that helps me to have compassion. When I see people overwhelmed by afflictions and behaving in the same way, I realize, oh, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just confused, overwhelmed by afflictions, and I can just come out of that system of moralistic judgment. So I was thinking about this in relation to our upcoming monastic Varsa as well, where we will commit to not giving feedback for about 3 months. And I wonder if during this time, I'm just wondering if the Buddha also designed this so that we could check up and relax from our own ingrained ideas of right and wrong. I don't know about you, but very often the first impulse to give feedback comes from my own ideas of what's right. And do I really need to say it now? It's helpful to check. And so we can relax from that. And eventually on Pravarana, which is not Judgment Day, but it's an invitation day, an invitation for feedback, right? We invite the feedback, and it's given in relation to the goal of liberation and full awakening. Right? That's why we give the feedback. It's not because you move a bunch of chairs and I'm so annoyed and na. It's like, wait. What is the goal here? Why am I giving this feedback? It's to help someone on the path to awakening, and hopefully they will help me too, right? And also, we also frame it in terms of what I have seen, heard, and suspected. Yeah, it's not, again, you did this and it's wrong or right. Yeah. Whereas, just the whole framework is just comes from a place of compassion, I would say. And that's something that's taking me time to learn and adjust to. So in closing, I just wanted to share that ever-famous quote by the mystic poet Rumi, which I think influenced Marshall Rosenberg too, where in a poem he says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. Let's meet there."